Thank you very much. Good morning. Wow, I feel as almost everything has been said. But the thing is that it hasn't been said from the perspective of the constituency that I represent. I represent local and regional governments that are gathered in a world organization, United Cities and local governments, around 260,000 of them around the world. So you can imagine the diversity of that reality. You've got them in all sizes and in all parts of the world, the north and the south and the west and the east. And that's the perspective that I want to bring to you, okay? There are very few things that are as defining for how we live as public space, right? There are very few things that define a city, a village as public space. There are also very few things that are significant for our identity, for our quality of life. But also there are very few things that challenge governance in the manner that defining public space or planning does. Because for us, from the perspective of local and regional governments, it's very hard to separate public space concepts from planning. Yeah. And it's very difficult to divide also, or to make a difference between planning and land use. These things really come together for us. They come as a package, and they are extremely difficult. Now, our challenges are that, well, let's face it, very few parts of our cities, the smallest parts of our cities, are planned. Most of the parts of the cities have grown organically. And as a matter of fact, one of my members, the mayor of Dakar, used to say, we always talk about urbanization, but we should be talking about ruralization of cities as well. Because there are many cities that were planned originally, but informality has taken over. And that is the reality in the biggest part of the world. When we look at these issues of urban planning, of design, we tend to think about the center of cities where with the iconic buildings and the dramatic changes, you know, in the riverside or etc. But the reality is that what we need to focus on is actually the intermediary cities. We need to focus also on the relation between the rural areas and the urban areas, and that is where the greatest challenges are. We need to stop conceiving the rural areas as a land asset for urban areas, you know, and planning has a lot to do with that. And it has a lot to do with that from a national perspective, and we're very happy with the promotion of national urban plans, like the ones that have been described by our host here in Malaysia. But we shouldn't forget that national urban plans shouldn't be determined from the top down, that objectives shouldn't be defined at national level, that actually those national urban plans should be built from the bottom up. Yes, you need a plan, you need a national urban plan, because otherwise we lose the cohesion that the territories need, the solidarity that you need to build between the territories. I fully agree with that. But you cannot destroy the identity and the needs and the local reality. And if I may, one of the very few comments that I would have for your presentation is maybe a little bit too little local government in it. The rest is very impressive. but that dimension there, I am kind of missing. So let us think about planning and urban design from that perspective. Urban design needs to help us shape and keep identities. It needs to help us demonstrate the diversity of our cities, the creativity of our settlements. But it also needs to help us keep our health. It also needs to help us achieve the right to the city. I will tell you another thing, which my members, the mayors around the world, might not like to hear, and it still is something that we need to admit, and that is our settlements, our cities, in particular urban areas, are not designed for the weak. And they are not designed for the poor. And they are not designed for the women. And they are not designed for the disabled. They are designed for the richest and the strongest and the fastest. Look at our tube systems. As a woman, it's really hard to survive in them, really, frankly. If you carry a little bit of weight, I don't know, I mean, it's really hard. And that's the reality that we live with, and that is what I would hope that the planning community of the world and the political leadership of the world, particularly in my constituency at local level, would come to terms with. And that is what an organization like United Cities and Local Governments is trying to promote. This shift in the thinking. Planning is a political, is a governance issue. New cities are not things that you build from scratch with professionals. New cities are something that we need to co-create, that the political leadership with the inhabitants, with the citizenship needs to create. But in order to do that, you need some tools, right? And of course, I mean, nothing has appeared spontaneously, but I think that it is within this group here, with the help of UN Habitat, we've got the responsibility to shape the normative, but also to try and change the narrative of the type of curricula and the way that we do work. Last thought. I don't want to be too long on this, because you know much more about this than I do, probably, the people that are in this room. I also think that it will be extremely important to take into account when we talk about planning and when we talk about design, about some of the hidden governance forces that are actors in our cities. I mean, there are very few things that actually are a full competence of local and regional governments. And one of those few things is public space. However, like you were starting to describe, public space is starting to be seen as a commodity, as a very commercial value, and not part of the commons. And that is going to be a true problem. So that is going to be extremely important for us in the definition of the new type of partnerships that the new urban agenda is promoting. It will be very, very critical to address that, to address how to involve the different actors and what role does the private sector play, and what is the balance between the market and the public. And until we get to do that, we will really have a very big challenge in defining a city that is accessible to all. So I would encourage you to help us think about it, to help us shape this new narrative, but also to find the right place to develop the type of dialogue that we need to change the way that planner works, to influence the politicians that need to shape the decision, and to raise awareness among the inhabitants, among the organized civil society, to hold us accountable, but also to try and construct in a positive way this new relationship. So I think that's the challenge of this dialogue, but in particular is the challenge for our work ahead. And please count on our organization of local and regional governments to spread this message and our lessons learned. Thank you very much.